In a world where Gen X women are literally trying to understand menopause and just survive out here, and Jesus must be the center of everything we do so we don't end up in jail.
We want to reserve a place where we can address our hot flashes and most definitely everything the Holy Ghost has laid on our hearts, all at the same time.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Alaina.
So come on, let's talk about it. Hello.
Welcome.
Right? I feel like we haven't done this in a while.
We haven't, because September was a super busy month. And so y'all know we pre-record sometimes. Usually it's just 2 weeks at a time, though. We'll record like every other week. But September we had to do way in advance because September was vacation month for both of us. It was Recovery Lab and Alexandria weekend. September was a busy month.
It was a busy month.
So we haven't recorded since the beginning of, the end of August.
Yeah,
we haven't recorded since the end of August.
We got everything done for September.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're
now
happy to be back.
We're back.
Yes.
And we discussed this before, but before we get started, so October is Substance Abuse Awareness Month.
Yes.
If you did not know that.
If you didn't know, now you know.
So, yes. So we're going to record each of our testimonies.
Yep.
And they're each going to be in two parts.
Right.
So the first 2 weeks will be mine.
Yep.
The second 2 weeks or second half of October will be yours in part 1 and part 2.
Right.
And so those of you that have asked, there have been several of you that have asked, when are y'all going to tell your stories? When are you going to? And we weave a little bit of it into our podcast sometimes, but we haven't actually told our whole story yet. So we're going to tell the bulk, I guess, most of it. Of course, we always say there's a lot of layers and different details come out every time we tell it.
We're going to give you the meat and potatoes.
Yes. But before we do that, can we just talk about the fact that
this girl here.
So listen, I'm just going to tell y'all.
I know y'all remember.
Y'all need friends like I got, okay? You can't have my friends because they're mine already. But y'all need friends like I got. If y'all don't have friends like I got, I'm sorry about you, bad luck. You need to pray for God to give you some friends like I got. That's all I'm saying. So, a couple episodes ago, I talked about the powder decanter, my Nana's powder decanter.
Yes, she did. I know y'all remember the episode.
So, my friend Deidre got me this powder decanter. Y'all, this is awesome. And I got powder in it, so I got to show you this. So today I was going to talk about this powder decanter in the beginning because we always talk about something funny. So I was like, we're going to talk about this piece later on. Michelle will address that on her
part. We're going to talk about that later.
Of her podcast. But so y'all just know this is us in case y'all wonder. So this powder decanter, Deidre got me this powder decanter and I love it. And so today I thought I had mentioned it to Michelle, but I guess I didn't because she was on vacation.
Apparently she got secrets.
You was on vacation, I think. So,
but I had a box.
Yes.
A white gift box.
So
right hidden. So I was going to give it to her live.
I come in and I'm like.
But Deidre went and ruined it.
She's like, what do you have? And I'm like, Deidre got me this powder decanter. I'm going to talk about it. And she's like, oh my goodness, here. She hands me this big box.
I really threw it to her.
Look at this. I got another powder decanter with the powder puff. It doesn't have powder, so I'm going to do this. Y'all. So I got 2 powder decanters now. They're each very beautiful and very unique. I'm going to set this over here.
She's going to start collecting them.
So I'll tell y'all what I'm going to do. I'm going to start collecting powder decanters.
Anybody that wants to send in.
Yes. So if you want to send me a powder decanter, feel free. Because these are awesome. They're old school.
Thanks for ruining the surprise, Deidre. So my heart was broken.
Y'all need friends like I got. I'm just saying. I love these, and they're going to go on my dresser. And yes, I've already been using this one, and yes, I'm going to use this one. I hear tell that this company that this came from does a powder subscription. Like you can get all different kinds of powders. Y'all.
Yes, y'all.
I'm for this.
Apparently people really get into
this stage and season of my life. I feel like a monthly powder subscription is exactly what I need. I mean, I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Maybe I need to try it.
Stitch Fix? No, I don't need Stitch Fix. I need powder subscription, monthly powder subscription. That's what I need in my life. I'm about to get it. So anyway... Anyway, y'all, I'm stoked about these powder decanters.
Apparently.
And so if the Lord tarries and I pass away and my children have to go through my things, there's going to be 11 powder decanters with all different kinds of my powder subscriptions in them. And they're going to have to divvy them up and decide who gets which one. and they'll probably really throw them in the trash. But anyway, I'm just saying.
If I'm around, I mean, I want one.
Okay, my powder collection has started.
It started.
I have two. So if the Lord drops it in your spirit to get me a powder decanter,
Just saying.
please obey the Holy Ghost. That's
Yes.
all I'm
Follow it.
saying.
Follow it. Don't deny her.
I love this. I can't, and I'm gonna get a different kind to go in here too. This is lavender cornstarch powder. I'm gonna get a different kind to go in
I
here.
can't with this. I cannot.
So what y'all can't see is, or maybe you can see, we have
put some
rearranged.
Johnson.
Our set is no. You get cancer from that. Stop. There's a lawsuit. I don't want no Johnson & Johnson powder. Don't send me no Johnson & Johnson powder. What y'all cannot see is we have
my word.
finally gotten our set how we need it, backdrop complete, all the things set up. And her husband is not behind the sound blanket anymore. He is
straight
directly in
ahead.
front of us.
He can,
And his face right now
he can see us.
cracking me up. So anyway, yeah, it looks so sharp in here.
It does.
And we're
It's just
excited.
nice to be back. Yeah.
Yes, it's very nice to be back.
Back in the groove of things.
So I guess we'll just dive right in. Enough about the powder decanters.
Enough about powder.
I'm gonna start I guess this will be part 1 of my testimony.
We got to break it up, y'all.
Yeah, because it's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack. And we ain't even going to unpack it all, but we're going to unpack some of it.
Yes, we're gonna give you like she said,
Condensed.
the Reader's Digest version, the meat
Yeah.
and potatoes version.
Yeah.
And if you have heard me tell my testimony at one point or another, and some of you have, then you'll probably notice you'll be like, oh, she said this, but she didn't say this before or whatever. And it's just because there's so many layers to it and so many
Yeah.
details to it that every time I tell it, it's the same but different,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Just because I'm a firm believer in that God always leads us to say the parts of it that need to be said.
For sure.
Or the different details of it. The outline of the story is always the same.
Yeah.
But sometimes different details or stories, parts of the story will emerge.
Yeah, because you can be telling it one time and you may leave something out because you think it's really not relevant.
Right.
Then the next time you tell it, it just flows into the
Yes.
story and you're like,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
And I've also
I don't
been-
usually talk about that, but
Yes. I've also been telling my story at times where I will go to say a part of it and God will just be like, shh, don't say
yeah.
that. Because it
Sometimes-
ain't for that moment.
Yeah.
I've had that happen to me.
Absolutely.
And then later find out that there was someone there or somebody there that either wouldn't have received it well or was in a place in their life where it wouldn't have benefited them.
Right.
That's happened to me more than one time.
Oh.
So I'm a firm believer in that. It always flows. What needs to be said flows. The
sure.
outline of the story, the basics of it stay the same. But sometimes the details and the scenarios that we talk about, you will find they're different for that reason. But I'll just start out. So I brought a different Bible today because this Bible's pretty special. So I'll just start by saying I was raised on an apostolic church pew in a tiny town in Louisiana. If you know where I'm from,
got a nice dress shop though.
they do. They have a great dress shop. There's like a blinking caution light
She ain't lying
in town.
y'all.
There's no.
I got to
there's
go to it.
Not even a stoplight.
Nope.
It's just a blinking light. And let's see. Growing up, there were just a couple gas stations and a grocery store. The grocery store isn't there anymore. And there were 14 churches, one on every corner. The Bible Belt of the South. That's
Yeah.
just how it was. I come from a great family. My family is not unlike your family. We have our own dysfunctions and our own problems and our own, but generally overall, I come from a great family.
Yeah.
I have great parents. I have one sister. She's the baby. There's 8 years between us, just me and her. My extended family. I have a host of aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents and just that. And then there's that church family that you grow up with, and those people just become an integral part of your life. And so I was very much had a normal upbringing.
Yeah.
And I always term it like that. I do that because once you go through a healing and recovery journey, the basics of it, and you get freed from some things and delivered from some things, you realize that it was normal, but you can see where there were some things that maybe probably, should have been addressed or should have had healing from, and it was nobody's
You realize
fault.
there was more monkeys in the circus
Yeah.
than what you probably thought then.
Yeah, and it's nobody's fault. It was my parents doing the best with
Sure.
what they had been handed and
Yeah,
what they had been taught.
absolutely.
And I have great parents. Let me clarify that. But it was things that were maybe handed to them that maybe their parents didn't know because
Right.
their parents handed it to them as
They were
generational.
just doing all they knew to do.
They were doing what they knew to do, and they did a great job. So it's nothing that I say is a reflection on them. I'm just saying that we can all look back.
Sure.
Unless you grew up with the Brady Bunch, we can all look back and see things that we struggle with or our parents struggled with that maybe at the time we didn't realize it, but then I got to a point where I could look back and go, oh, okay, that probably wasn't a great thing. That
Yeah.
probably wasn't, maybe that dynamic could have been a little better, or maybe,
Sure.
But I was raised on an apostolic church pew, and I got the Holy Ghost. I was 9 years old. So I got the Holy Ghost at a very young age. I'm 47 now, so it was been a long time ago. Almost,
She's older than me.
Almost 40 years. So 38 years, something like that. My math's not real good. Yeah, 38 years ago. I got the Holy Ghost at age 9 and got baptized. And so thus began my journey. And grew up in the church, raised up in the church. I remember, I tell the story a lot. Brother A.L. O'Brien and Sister O'Brien were the pastors at the time. And she was a musician, songwriter, singer, very talented, could play, I think, just about any instrument that she sat down at. Very talented. That was back in the days of albums, and she
yeah.
had several albums, and not
Yeah.
made music, and just very, very talented. Was a huge influence on my life as a child in a great way. But I remember at 10, 11, 12 years old, she would push me. That was when they had the choir, the chorale, and they had a wooden Coke flat box that Coke bottles came in, and they would turn it over, and I would stand on top of it so I could reach the microphone at the lowest level because I was so little. And that's what I grew up doing. I would sing with the chorale, with the grown-ups, with they were the young folks at the time, but, they were the, teenagers and 20-somethings, and that was, and so I grew up in the middle of that, being pushed to excel with my talent that God
Yeah.
had given me and pushed to do.
And she could sing, y'all.
And I would cry. I would sing my heart out, but tears rolling down my face because I was scared to death. But she was very much, you have a talent, you're not going to waste it. God gave it
Right.
to you for a reason, and you're
Right.
going to. But I appreciate that to this day because
I'm sure.
she honed that talent in me, and
Yeah.
she pushed me, and my mother did as well. But Sister O'Brien was instrumental in bringing that out in me because she saw something in me, and she pulled at it and pulled at it and pulled at it,
Yeah.
and she was never mean to me, but there were times when she would, kind of get me stern because she knew that I could do better, I could be better, I could do more, and she pushed me, and I'm grateful for that. I have very fond memories of her. Brother O'Brien, I was terrified of him. He was a giant of a man, and he wasn't a mean man, but he was just very, he could be very stern and those were back in the days when you would get called on the carpet, they would say.
Yeah.
And if you did something and it warranted getting up in front of the church and having that was old school
Called on the
apostolic,
carpet.
you get called on the carpet. And I was a child, so obviously I never did, but I remember people that would be, and I just remember being so afraid and like, oh my goodness, I
Yeah.
don't want to, but I also
I don't wanna be
remember,
them.
yeah, I don't want to be them. I don't want to sin. I don't want to, and so it was very much, and then I remember, and I'm just being transparent, I remember a lot of things growing up that I didn't understand because you get to a point where you're a preteen, a teenager, and I'm going into junior high, and by this time, my dad did not go to church anymore. He stopped going regularly when I was in like the 5th grade. And then not long after that, my mom backslid. I think about a year or two later, she backslid. And so I continued to go to church. And I would go with my grandparents, and I was very much involved. And then I got through my junior high school years, and I was my 8th grade year. And, everybody at school was getting to do all the cool stuff, and I wasn't allowed to. I couldn't participate in sports like they could. I didn't get to go to the dances like they did. I didn't get to go hang out on the weekends like they did. And everything I was missing out. That was my thought pattern. And so thus began the beginning of backsliding and wrong choices. And at that young of an age, it was maybe 13, 14. And so that was really kind of the beginning of it for me. And then I stayed backslidden all through my high school years, all through. And so then when I was 19 years old, because I was backslid and had been for years, I got with someone and ended up marrying, who's now my ex-husband. I ended up marrying him. And he was 12, 13 years older than me.
I was going to say you were younger.
Yeah, I was much younger. Yeah. He was 32, 33 at the time, maybe. Yeah. I was 19. Yeah. I was a kid, very much a kid. And we got married in 1996, August of 96. And I chuckle when I say this now because it's when you start recounting your life, you realize, what were you thinking?
And if y'all have never asked yourself that question, hang on tight. You will.
Just hold on.
You will.
And so here's the thing. And he had already was expecting a child with someone else that he had not been married to.
What?
Yeah. You don't know this part of my story.
Y'all.
So he was expecting a child with someone else that it was a one night stand basically type deal. It was like a short, I don't know if you call it a relationship. I mean, I don't know. It might have been more than but it wasn't like any kind of a lengthy thing. It was just kind of like a real quick.
Well, I guess I didn't realize you'd been in her life from jump.
Yes. So he was already expecting a child with this person
makes sense to me,
when we got together. Yeah. And it was like August, September of 95. It was September, October of 95 when we got together. Well, in March of 96, March 15th of 96, my oldest daughter was born. In August of 96, we got married. Okay. August 17th of 96, we got married.
That makes sense.
Yes.
I'm just saying. It's flowing, y'all. It's flowing.
In the fall of that same year, so she was just not a year old yet, we got her and began to raise her. And I've been in her life since day one, basically.
She's my mother and daughter as any mother and daughter.
She's definitely my daughter.
I've watched y'all.
Yeah, that's never even a question.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, her whole life that I would, bring her to church, and I grew up with these people. They helped raise me in church, and she got on up and then people would they thought she was nobody ever knew.
Yeah, I would have never questioned it if you hadn't said
and
something
so
about it.
When they would find out or somebody would say something, they would be like, no, I'm talking about Brooke, Alaina's daughter Brooke. And they'd be like, yeah, she's her mama, but she didn't actually give birth to her. And so people would be so shocked. And even today, sometimes that happens and people are like, what? Yeah. And so anyway, so she's very much my daughter, but she came first. And then 3.5, 4 years later in 99, 3.5 years later in 99, Emily came along. So I have two daughters. And we were married, my ex-husband and I were married we were together for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
We were married for 99 to 14, 15 years. Yeah. So, but we were together for a little over a year before that. So we were working on almost 20 years. We were 16, 17 years. Anyway, we were working on 20 years. So we had, there's a lot of life there. I very much grew up with him.
Big part of your story.
Yeah. I grew up with him.
Yeah.
So when at 19 years old, when you give somebody 20 years, almost 20 years of your life, that's a lifetime.
Sure it
when
is.
You start that young.
Those are big years too.
Yeah. That's Anyway, so the only problem was he was a drug dealer and a drug user.
It's the only problem.
It's the only problem. He was a drug dealer and a drug user.
Yeah.
And I was never exposed to any of that.
Yeah.
Ever. My parents didn't even drink.
Yeah.
I mean, and I remember on and off later on in the years after they backslid, they would a little bit, but my parents didn't smoke, they didn't drink, they didn't cuss, they didn't,
Yeah.
like, I was not, even when they didn't go to church,
Yeah.
they didn't do that.
Yeah.
They just like,
There was lines they
I
probably would
remember
never be
when we
willing to
got our
cross.
first TV and VCR from Conn's Home Appliances,
Jesus.
my 5th grade year of high
I
school.
hope God's forgiven y'all for that.
Listen, it was like, clutch
asked
your
Karen
pearls
earlier.
moment. It was like, I remember, it was like, you know, that was a huge thing.
That's funny.
It was like, oh my goodness. And it was, yeah. And so we just didn't, I was not raised like, was never exposed to anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I married him, and that was very much the way it was. But here's what I did. I said, okay, well, you do that, I'll do this, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Because there was something in me from jump that knew, don't ask him to choose, because you're not going to like the answer.
Yeah.
Don't try to put your foot down,
Yeah.
because, I mean, he's 30-something years old. He's been like this his whole life.
Yeah.
Like his whole adult life. So that's just a given at this point. Don't ask him to choose, because he's not going to give it up. And so I never did. I just lived with it.
Right.
Raised 2 kids, worked a job, had good jobs. I had many different jobs. I was always looking for a better opportunity, financial gain, not in a big way, but just to keep the bills paid and stuff
Sure.
afloat, and have, keep the note, we had a mobile home on 5 acres eventually, and just to keep the note paid on it, and to get the stuff, and to raise kids, and to just try to provide some kind of life for them.
Yeah.
He was never abusive or ugly or mean or anything like that. Yeah. He did the best he could as far as trying to be a dad
Yeah.
and a husband. I think he just really didn't know how.
How? Yeah.
And I was 19 years old. I certainly didn't know how.
Right.
But I knew what I had seen my parents do. And so I thought, that's what you did.
Right.
So that's what I did. Not realizing that my parents came from a different generation. They came from a generation where the wife stays home all day, and she has a hot meal on the table when he gets in from work,
Right.
and she raises the kids, and she does all the chores, and she runs the household, and she does. And my dad went out every day and worked hard, and he provided for his family, and he paid the bills, and he was very much the provider. And he was I love you. But he wasn't, he was a quiet man. He wasn't very vocal about things like that. And as a child, I never thought, I wonder if my dad loves me.
Yeah.
I never wondered that. I knew he did.
Yeah.
He didn't have to say it. I knew he did.
Yeah.
And of course, my mom, I knew she loved me.
Right.
She told me all the time, but she took care of me. She showed me and all these things. So I didn't have abusive parents. I didn't have a terrible childhood. I had a great childhood.
Right.
It wasn't a perfect childhood, but I had a great childhood. And so I tried to give my kids the same thing, and I tried to treat my husband the way that I had seen my mom treat my dad. Only we're a different generation.
Yeah.
And we're living in a different time, and
Yeah.
he's doing these things that I know aren't right.
Yeah.
But I love him.
And probably resentment is secretly building up inside of you.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
just not addressing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I want normal.
Sure.
I just want normal. I just want blue collar, middle class America.
Yeah.
A house, 2 kids, and a dog, and a husband, and let's take a vacation every summer if we can, or
Yeah.
whatever, and let's go to dinner on our anniversary, and let's have Christmas, and this is seriously, that's what I wanted. That's all I wanted. I didn't want any, that was it. I didn't have any, that's all I wanted. I was fine with having to work and fine with having to help make ends meet, and, but then it got to where he wasn't real fond of holding a decent job because he couldn't pass a drug test. And so he would do jobs that were not, that you didn't have to pass a drug test.
Yeah.
Those kind of jobs don't make you a lot of money.
No.
And so that was where we were. And so I very quickly took control. I had to make a living. I had to make ends meet.
Yeah,
I had to
sure.
take care of 2 kids. And the whole time I hid this from my kids. My kids grew up, their dad and I did not separate until 2013. Okay. The end of January 2013. And when we separated, it was because he had had an affair and with a much younger person. She was in her 20s. And it was like a gut punch.
Sure.
It was worse than that. It was like somebody had walked up to my forehead and put a gun to it and pulled the trigger. That's what I felt like.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I felt, I've never been able to adequately describe it. I remember telling my mom at one point, it feels like somebody died.
There's no words.
It was like a death.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Here's what I didn't realize. It was never right. And eventually, when my youngest daughter was a little over a year old, I did go back to church. And I got back in church, and I went to church for like 9 years, till 2009.
Yeah.
And I was a Sunday school teacher. I was on the music team. I was on the ladies team. I threw myself into ministries.
Yeah.
I threw myself into the kingdom work, into God's work, and I threw myself into, because there was nothing at home.
Yeah.
There was nothing. He was living a life that I did not want to live, and I was trying to keep it separate but still keep my marriage together. And so I would put on a front and put on a show like, well, it's okay. I got this. We got this together.
Yeah.
But really, I was just dying inside. There was no, I just wanted somebody to just, can you just love me? Can we just be normal? And here's the crazy thing. Up until the day before it blew up, the man would tell me he loved me every single day.
Yeah.
Even during the affair.
Yeah.
He would look at me in my face and say, he would tell me goodbye before he leave, kiss me goodbye, I love you, blah, 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 da, 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 da. And I look back on that now and I think, God, you were an idiot. Like, what were you? But then my next thought is always, but we didn't know. We didn't know how to do it. And so because we didn't know how to do it, we just plowed through it.
Yeah.
And because it was never right from the beginning, because that lifestyle and the lifestyle I was accustomed to did not mesh together.
No.
Your people matter. Who you are fellowshipping with matters.
Right.
And I preach that and preach that and preach that because I know it.
Yeah.
I never should have even been in the same circle as him.
No.
Not because I'm better.
No.
But because those two lifestyles got no business meshing together.
Unequally
The
yoked.
Bible says don't be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
And so then at that point I'm 2 teenage daughters in. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, or almost 14-year-old at this time, 13 and a half years old. And I just turned 17-year-old, or about to turn 17 years old. And the damage was done.
Sure.
And they're reeling because here's the crazy thing, y'all. They didn't know
Yeah.
that their dad did any of that.
You protected them
I protected
from seeing
them.
that.
I
Yeah.
kept it. I
Sure.
hid it. They didn't know.
Yeah.
And so then when it all fell apart, they're looking at me like, what have you
you do?
done? What'd you do?
Yeah.
This is your fault.
Yeah.
And a part of me didn't want to say anything bad about him. But a bigger part of me was so angry.
Yeah.
My world was upside down.
That's a special kind of anger.
I didn't know what way to turn. I didn't know what to do. And my family, for the first time in my life, my mama looked at me and she said, I don't know how to help you.
Wow.
I can't fix this.
Yeah.
She said, I love you and I'm here for you, but I don't know what to do for you. I don't know how to fix this.
Yeah.
She couldn't fix it.
No.
And instead of running to God, instead of turning to what I knew in the back of my mind, I knew the answer. I was raised in it.
Yeah.
I did not. I turned and I ran so far away. And I remember thinking, well, you're going to do this to me? Well, I'm going to do it better than you.
Oh, yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, the enemy saw that and he came in like a flood.
Oh,
He
yeah.
came in like, it was like a tsunami, not a flood. He came in like a tsunami. And I remember the day when I got the phone call from the person that I got with just a few months after, it wasn't even months, it was weeks after we split up. And I remember the day I got the phone call. And they just called me, chit chat, how you doing? I heard y'all split up. Are you okay? you want to go to dinner Friday or Thursday, whatever night it was. I don't even remember. Let's go to dinner. I'll take you to dinner. And I'm thinking, you're 24 years old in my mind. And I was like,
Oh, but
yes.
wait a minute. How old was that other one?
Yeah.
Oh, bet.
Yeah. I think she was 26, 25, 26.
Oh,
She wasn't
I'm
very
better.
old. Yeah. I was like, oh, bet. I got you, Les. Yes. Yes, let's go to dinner.
You got Barbie, I got Ken.
Right?
Ding.
It was, listen, it was the worst kind of evil. Only I didn't know
I
it.
hear you, girl.
I didn't know it. And so then I link up with that.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, here's what happened. In the beginning, it was all the emotions, all the feelings, all the things, all the attention,
Yeah.
all of the things that in almost 20 years I had never been shown.
It was that normal in that moment. It filled
Yes.
that space.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had never been treated like that, never been talked to like that.
It was like everything you ever dreamed that you didn't even know you were dreaming.
in a minute, in a
Yep.
second. That was what it was.
Yeah.
Only until it wasn't.
Dangerous.
And it became quickly, it became an entanglement.
Yeah.
And it became so twisted together
sucks
so
you in.
quickly.
Yeah.
And before I knew what was happening, I was too far.
Yeah.
I was into it and I could not turn it loose.
Yeah.
And it was about a year into that relationship. Well, I say a year. It was about six to 8 months into that relationship.
Yeah.
And he was a drug user. And he actually got drugs from my husband. That's how they, and they've known him my whole life. He was a
How
kid.
convenient.
He was a kid. Known him my whole life.
Convenient.
And he'd come back from the military and would get from my husband and come by and visit and this and that. And, it's like a revolving door of people when you're in that
Oh.
kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so just a few months into the relationship, the worst thing I had ever done was smoke pot every once in a while. I had a girlfriend and we'd get together on the weekends sometimes and we'd, do that. As I'm not saying that's not bad, as if that's not bad enough.
No. But I know what
And
you're saying.
I had gotten to where I would, there was a certain kind of pills I would take on the weekends to just kind of get a little, and have a little fun, and then that was it.
Yeah.
But that was the opening. That was the beginning. And that was while I was still married to my ex-husband. And so just those months into that relationship, I remember trying methamphetamine for the first time. And that was the beginning of about 4 years of drug addiction.
Beginning of the end.
Yeah, it was the beginning of the end. I say that all the time. It was the beginning of the end. And so for the next 4 years of my life, it very much spiraled out of control. You've heard that term, slow burn?
Yeah.
That's what it was in the beginning. It was a slow burn
Yeah.
for probably the first year.
But then when it took off.
And when it ignited,
Oh, feel that.
that was it.
Yeah.
There was no going back.
No.
And I knew it.
Yeah.
And the further down the rabbit hole I went, the more hopeless I became.
Yeah.
And the darkness that engulfed me, to this day, I don't have adequate words for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I ever will.
I don't think there are words.
No. And so the next 4 years of my life, my family's life, my children's life, it got deep.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just probably pause right here.
Okay.
Because this is definitely going to be 2 parts. And so on part 2, I'll continue and finish the story of getting totally obliterated in addiction. And obviously the redeeming power
Yes.
of God, because here we sit today.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for when you tell your story, because y'all are going to be surprised, I think, if you don't know how similar our stories are.
Kind of crazy.
It is. And how God put us together.
Our age, our stories, it's just weird.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It will show you.
Even
God
the second,
there's no accident.
No, the second chapters of our lives.
Yeah.
Our husbands we have now and our lives we have now. Y'all, it's crazy.
It is crazy.
And bringing us from totally different parts of the world.
Right?
To Cleveland, Texas.
If
If y'all don't know where Cleveland, Texas is, look it up.
we didn't either before.
We didn't either. We didn't know. I didn't know nothing about Cleveland, Texas. She did, but I didn't know nothing about it.
I've been knowing about Cleveland. That's because this was the area that I got lost in addiction in. So we drive by pawn shops and I'm like, I wonder if they still got my mama's old wedding ring.
Stop.
We laughing about that stuff now. There was a time when we wasn't.
No. And people say sometimes, y'all joke about the craziest stuff. That's serious stuff. And I'm like, yeah, in the moment. But when God brings you through some things and he gives you the strength and the opportunity to tell your story.
You're gonna laugh it out.
Sometimes you just got to laugh it out to keep from sobbing about it,
You gotta laugh
because
it out.
you got to let those wounds heal.
Yeah.
And our mamas have forgiven us. Thank you, Jesus.
Thank God for that.
Our families have forgiven us. And so I know I was kind of getting to a serious part of my story where my addiction began, but I had thought earlier today, that's probably where I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
So I am going to pause there, and y'all have to tune in next week to hear the second half.
Yes.
But
before we end, remember, it's just like Alaina said, this is Substance Abuse Awareness Month.
Yes.
We're doing this for a reason.
Yes.
To bring awareness to this. Hey, we were raised on a church pew. We know that there are people out there that are listening to this. Maybe you're struggling with addiction, but maybe you have a family member, a parent, a child, a husband, a wife that's struggling with addiction. And that's the reason we want to bring awareness to this. We can't live in a stigma in this place where we think that just because we have a church or just because we're part of a church that it doesn't happen. There are people dying on church pews that don't know how to address it, And that's the reason we want to bring this to the table and just say, let's talk about it. Let's put it out there. We're not proud of what we did, but most definitely we're proud of the God that brought us out of where we were.
And I'm proud to tell my story because it's powerful and it has meaning, and it does help people.
Absolutely.
You and I have both experienced that.
Yes.
Have total strangers come up to me after speaking something or them listening to us or hearing something and say, you have no idea how much your story.
Real.
That's the only reason why I tell it.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you what.
It's someone else's survival guide.
I didn't do anything to deserve where I'm at today.
Me neither.
But I want people to know that there is hope. I don't care where you are. There is hope.
Doesn't matter how far you've gone.
I remember in school we used to do the Red Ribbon Month for Substance Abuse Awareness Month, and that's what October is. So, and just know, this might sound cliche, but it's not. We genuinely pray for everybody that listens to us, watches us. We do a recovery class with our husbands and another team on Monday nights at our church.
Yep.
We genuinely, this is our heart.
Yeah.
This is our passion.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a lot of different passions. If you want to see me get emotional about something and get worked up about something, talk about recovery to me.
Yeah.
Talk about healing. Talk about deliverance to me. Talk about the power of God.
For real.
And
transformation.
That's my passion. Because God says be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's exactly what we're about.
Yes.
And I can talk about it and be passionate about it because I am it.
Yes.
We are it.
Yep.
And so Kevin Johnson said to us one time, the way that y'all tell your stories, like how you have the courage to do that. And we're like, yeah, because it's God. It's only Him.
Yep.
He said, I've never seen people be so raw and so, he didn't say unfiltered, but we are very much unfiltered. Yeah. Because you know what? That's what people need to know, though. Yeah. And he was complimenting us. He wasn't.
For sure.
It was a compliment. He was complimenting us. But that's what what you see is what you get with us.
Yeah.
If I'm sorry, that's what you get.
We recover loudly.
Yes,
y'all.
we don't
For
do it
all
quietly.
the people suffering in silence.
We don't do it
recover
silently because
there's people dying.
No.
They won't talk about it.
And there are people that are afraid.
Yes. And we can't. We got to stop being scared.
Exactly.
It's okay to be broken. Just don't stay there. It's okay to be an addict. Just don't stay there.
Right.
I'm not saying it's okay to be lost in addiction.
No.
But it's okay if that's where life has brought you.
Yes.
Let's just get out of it.
Yes.
It's okay if you're sick. If you've
Absolutely.
got mental issues or whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about it.
Yes.
Come on. on. Let's talk about
Exactly.
it. And that's another thing is the last episode this month, we're going to field questions.
Yes.
So go onto our social media, email us.
Yes.
I think he can put the email address at the bottom of the screen, but
Yes.
it is hotflashesholyghost@gmail.com, I believe.
Yes.
And email us.
Yes.
Go on our social media, leave a comment on our page, send us a message, whatever
Yes.
you need to do. But send us your questions. We want to have an episode that is dedicated to your questions at the end of the month. Who in your life is struggling with addiction and pain and loss or whatever? And let us help. Let us help out. Let us answer your questions. You know, that's what we're here for.
And
we,
you'll
we
get
ain't experts, but we act like we are.
I think we talked about this among ourselves, but not with our husbands. I think they're going to do like a little cameo so y'all can actually see them.
Oh,
and
yes.
see what they look like.
So y'all can see
y'all can meet
who
them.
got stuck with all this. That way you know how to pray.
Yes, y'all know who to pray for. You put a face to your prayers.
Put it on your prayer list.
Yes.
We love you guys.
We love y'all
so much.
Yes.
We're excited for part 2 of this.
Yes.
See you soon.